Michael Boyle's StrengthCoach.com presents the Strength Coach Podcast, brought to you by Perform Better, the experts in functional training and rehabilitation. PerformBetter.com.
All right, hey everybody, welcome to episode 244 of the Strength Coach Podcast, the official podcast of Michael Boyle's StrengthCoach.com, the world's best source for strength and conditioning information. Brought to you by Perform Better, the experts in functional training and rehabilitation. PerformBetter.com. All right, I'm your host, Anthony Renna, and the show notes are located at ContinueFit.com. It's where I keep all my resources, including Strength Coach TV. So if you're opening a gym, make sure you check that out. All right, today on the StrengthCoach.com Coach's Corner, spoke to Coach Boyle about his article. For 36 years, I patiently waited at the train station, hoping my ship would come in. We went the whole time just on this article. This is a pretty important article. It's what Coach Boyle thought really was his most important article in the last 10 years. So good stuff coming up on that segment. For the Results Fitness University Business of Fitness segment, did something a little different. Today I'm on with Rachel Cosgrove. We're on together, and she's been running in these obstacle course races, and she got pretty serious this year. And so I wanted to just basically, I had a couple questions about how she's kind of managing her business and really having that commitment to the OCRs. So today she's going to talk about how she draws the line between kind of being friends and teammates with employees and members. For the Functional Movement System segment, we got Jenna Gourlay back on. She's going to finish her two-part case study about a basketball player she worked with. For the Train Heroic Data-Driven Coaching segment, I actually don't know what they're going to be talking about today. I had to record this a little bit early with the holidays, so they're sending it to me later. So it's going to be a surprise, but always good stuff coming up from Adam Dowdy in a little while. For the MariGold Bars Hit the Gym with the Strength Coach segment, we got on Fergus Connolly. He's one of the world's leading experts in team sports and human performance. We've had him on before. He's the author of the book, Game Changer. Now he's the author of 59 Lessons Working with the World's Elite Coaches, Athletes, and Special Forces. I spoke to him about a few excerpts from the book on topics like being able to adapt to different situations, getting out of your comfort zone, and a lesson in humility. Lots of great stories coming up from Fergus. And don't forget, MariGold Bars, high-quality protein with all the premium ingredients. Check them out at MariGoldBars.com. You can use the code StrengthCoach10. You'll get $10 off your first order. All right, lots of things to get to, so let's get on the phone with Coach Boyle. All right, now it's time for the StrengthCoach.com Coach's Corner with Coach Boyle. StrengthCoach.com, the world's best source for strength and conditioning information. You can try Strength Coach out for 3 days just to buck. You have access to all the articles, videos, and programs, as well as the best forum on the net. It's the only place to have full access to Coach Boyle. He's on every day answering questions, asking questions. Coach, how you doing?
Anthony, I am doing great. Spectacular. Getting ready for the holidays. We were just talking about it. I love Thanksgiving because there's no presents. There's no bullshit. Just eat, drink, and be merry. Really easy.
Yeah, I don't know. There's plenty of bullshit, but you know.
I'm not associated with spending money, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. You're right. Good stuff. Coach, we're probably going to spend some time on this article. You wrote an article called "For 36 years, I patiently waited at the train station, hoping my ship would come in." I think a lot of people didn't catch it right away that you don't wait for a ship at a train station, but you did kind of clue them in at the end. But give us an overview before I start asking questions. Give us an overview of what this was about.
What it was really about, and you kind of alluded to it in the sort of our little off mic open, but it's a big change. It was something that I was really resistant to, and I love. Like I love these. I would call them now kind of the Mark Verstegen, the McGill kind of moments when I see somebody doing something better than us, and I think, okay, this is something that needs to change. I remember watching Mark throw medicine balls off a wall, and think, man, I got to get me a wall. Like, that's unbelievable. Like, they had this huge wall at IPI that they just built at the end of the building. Massive concrete wall. And it was so like, oh my God, I can't believe we're not doing this. We're so stupid. And then it was McGill with core training. And then I really feel like Tony with speed training, you kind of look at it and you go, damn, he's obviously smart. He's obviously got a lot of evidence, and he's obviously right. So here goes. Like, okay, let's start timing. And it runs contrary to two things. One, I've always said I don't like testing because I feel like testing makes people feel bad, makes kids feel bad. And this is a little bit of the exception to the rule here in the sense that you have to do it. And it's also a little bit the exception to the rule because I've always been, as I said, I think I've been a little bit afraid of speed, full speed on a day-to-day basis because it was always, you don't want somebody to pull a hamstring. And so I think Tony kind of got me over both of those humps. And it was a really good thing. And I said to somebody yesterday, I was talking to the 3 strength coaches from Tufts University, came over to visit, actually day before yesterday. My son, Mark, so I've seen it and I always use my own kids as examples because the poor little things are just lab rats a lot of times. But Mark's dropped his 10-yard dash time by 0.3 of a second. That is massive.
Wow.
He's gone from running 1.8s to running 1.5s. And the only thing I could tell you, we haven't done anything significantly different from a programming standpoint, except run a lot of full speed sprints.
Coach, the funny thing, I took this out. I thought it was ironic. You know, you said the only time we took speed serious was combine time. NFL placed a premium on speed with athletes and who were looking to play in NFL. So we increased our volume and frequency of sprinting and timed twice a week. So it's funny that you weren't afraid there and you didn't kind of almost like catch on with the rest of the crowd.
I think there you have no choice. Like, you got to get the guy faster and you've got to take some risk just because, hey, they're going to be only judged really, ultimately, they're going to be judged on one thing, how fast they run. And I could look at everything else and say, hey, we're still working. We worked on speed, sort of. We ran sprints. We did our run gambetta drills, our lean fall run drills, our ball drops. We did all that stuff. So I think it was easy to rationalize in my own mind that we did our speed work. But the reality of that was probably that we did a lot of 80 and 90% sprinting and not a lot of 100%. And it was interesting. One of the guys from Tufts said, well, you don't like one arm stuff in the weight room anymore. Why do you like it sprinting? And I said, because a guy like Tony has proven to me that the injury potential of sprinting is very, very low. And I would say, we talked about, I said, do you enjoy test day at college or do you survive test day? And he kind of laughed and said, you survive it. You just watch it and hope nobody gets hurt. I said, exactly. That's what we did when we were doing 1RM stuff. I can just remember sitting there every day cringing, thinking, God, let me get through this day without anybody getting seriously hurt.
Yeah. Right.
And that's not a great way to coach. And the same way we'd time 40s. And I can remember 40s, preseason football, running 40s and just thinking, God, if we get through this and no one pulls a hamstring, it's a victory. I don't even care what the times look like. All I care about is that nobody pulls a hamstring and is going to be out for the first 3 weeks of the season because our coaches insisted on timing 40s. And so I think you develop maybe even an unhealthy paranoia. I think there's a healthy paranoia. And then in my case, maybe it was an unhealthy paranoia. And I think what we really did is we took Tony's stuff and whatever, bastardized it or compromised it, however you want to look at it, because we're literally just timing 10s and flying 10s. Tony's getting a 10-yard fly out of a 40. But the difference I think that people have to look at is Tony's talking about track. We're talking about team sport. And so I'm perfectly content with saying basically the furthest we sprint or we have sprinted is 25 yards. We've done a 10-yard fly with a 15 yards lead in. And I could tell you legitimately that we have had zero. I figured it out yesterday 2 days ago for the Tufts guys, that we minimally did 6,000 reps last summer. Minimally. Could have been between 6 and 10 based on the fact that a lot of people ran more than 2. But if we said 600 kids ran twice a week, 2 times 2. So basically 2,400 reps a week. Actually, I lied. I said It's way more than that. It's 24,000.
Yeah, there you go.
6,000. We did 24,000 times, and we didn't get anybody hurt. That's a pretty good indication that nobody's going to get hurt when you start thinking about that.
And the risk now is worth the reward, especially.
Oh, yeah. Because you realize there is no risk.
Yeah.
You know, when you look at it, you say,
Minimal.
the risk is definitely worth the reward because there wasn't any risk.
Mm-hmm.
The risk was in my head, particularly when and this is where people have to read, like Record, Rank, and Publish. They should read every one of Tony's articles because we've got a bunch of them on the site. And he's very specific, no races. And he breaks his own rule. He has gauntlet day sometimes. But generally speaking, he's not putting two kids up and having them run against each other. Guys, you're running and you run, it's literally like run your own race. You're trying to beat you. There's one guy you got to beat. That's you. What's your best time? Okay, try to beat it. And when you do that and you keep the reps low, again, in our case, 2 reps. And I would say there was a lot of days we ran 4 because people would be like, come on, one more kind of thing. But it was never 10. And then I haven't put it up yet, actually. I have a PDF that I'm going to put up on the site. I'm going to maybe try to do it today. But it was called The Effects of Sprint Training and the Nordic Hamstring Exercise on Eccentric Hamstring Strength and Sprint Performance in Adolescent Athletes. Very long title. But what it basically said was that sprint training was as good for strength and sprint speed development as Nordic hamstring was. And so, again, you realize that, and this is why I was saying to you there's a part 2 to this article, because the other part about this, and this is the second part of Tony's thing, is that sprinting is the real velocity-based training. One of the things I talked about when I went to Altus is that for a long time I could never kind of rationalize the Ben Johnson versus Carl Lewis thing in my mind. How do Carl Lewis and Ben Johnson run the same time? Within hundredths of a second of each other. One guy's kind of a little leaner, lankier, not known as a weight room guy. The other guy is shorter, stockier, very much known as a weight room and a steroid guy, right? And then I said to them, but what do they have in common? Running sprints. And one of the things that you realize is that you can take 2 widely divergent training programs, maybe in the weight room, but if both people do a lot of full speed sprinting, they'll both get fast. And that's why you see some of the horrific Usain Bolt strength training video on YouTube. I mean, where he's just doing things that you look and think, how can the best man in the world possibly be doing this? But the difference is he's running full speed. And when you think velocity-based training, those guys are running greater than 10 meters a second. There's nothing in the weight room that even vaguely approaches 10 meters a second. I actually had I pulled up the data from a guy named Ashley Jones's article, and I'm going to, honestly, I'm going to open it up right here so I can tell you exactly what the numbers were without making them up. But you realize we're doing all this velocity-based training in the weight room. And one, like we talked about in the article, it's all vertical. It's not horizontal to begin with. So it's extremely non-specific from a vector standpoint. And then you start looking, and is it really very specific from a, power snatch, 1.5 meters per second. That's the fastest thing anybody does in the weight room. 1.5. Sprinting is 10. Bad sprinting is 8. Sled sprinting is 5. So when we start looking at this and saying that anybody doing sprints from a velocity-based training standpoint is way better off than anybody lifting weights. And so we've just got to be able to look at that stuff and realize, and then, bar speed's like in the bench press, 0.8 to 1 meters a second, right? I mean, just how can you even think, okay, I'm going to squat fast and that's going to make me faster versus I'm going to go out and sprint fast and that's going to make me faster. I guess it's one of those, and I always say that the big changes for me most of the time fall into like the really kind of category, because you look at that and think, wow. And I got to give credit where credit. Let me go back to Cam Joss kind of got me running down this path mentally, which led me to JB Morin, and which kind of, and I don't know whether that led me to Tony first or Tony afterwards. I can't decide which happened. I'd have to go back and sort of look at my notes. And then the crazy part is Steve Bunker that works for me, and he works with us. I shouldn't say for me. He works with us runs our North Andover facility, now our Middleton facility, has been doing this for years and telling me that we should be doing it in Woburn. And I'm always like, oh, it's a pain in the ass, set up the timer, blah, blah, blah. And I said at the end of the article, Steve was right, and he was right for a really long time.
Wow.
He just didn't listen. And I think that's the other part that everybody should be listening to is get out and do the freaking experiment. Do it. Because it's amazing. You will not look back. I will guarantee you will not look back.
Mike, for every yes, there's a no. And the way you're kind of like, I'm kind of getting, okay, right now, I know there's other reasons to lift. Obviously, football, hockey, we want to put some weight on. Maybe we have some injury prevention ideas, but this has got to change other things too. Like what else is like, do we really need to Olympic lift if we were so focused on the speed of that? I know they're getting us more athletic, but is there better things? Should we be spending our time? Are there other things that this is going to lead to that says maybe the weight room, there's a few things we can take out and focus on other things?
I guess I would probably look at you and say, yeah, maybe. But I don't know if I'd look at you and say yes. Again, I love Olympic lifting. And I still think we need to do some sort of, we need to do knee dominant exercise. We need to do hip dominant exercise. I do think force production matters. I guess the point of the article was that force production and power production matter, but getting to the right speed and getting the right vector probably matter more. So I don't know. The good thing for us, we've always done sprints. We haven't taken anything out because we just put our 10s in where our lean fall runs in or where our ball drops were, or whatever that was. We just said, okay, now we're doing something slightly different. But going back, and Devin McConnell will love this, I always say the intent, the title of his book, right? Mm-hmm. It's the intent to go as fast as you can that is the biggest change. Because suddenly when you put that timer down and kids start knowing what they know the score, then it's different. So, and I guess there's just no way to approach it other than that.
Yeah, it just makes me think like, okay, I feel like if I'm with, obviously you have a pretty big gym and you have a lot of resources there to start to really look at, okay, do we really need Olympic lifts? Do we need to put people through certain things? Should we be focusing on other things? Because like this seems to be like a big, wow, what else are we missing type of thing? Like even for injury prevention, I mean, should we be doing more, do we need to lift this kind of weight, or will body weight stuff, like, because really sprinting is technically body weight, right? Or I know it's load, you're going to argue it's load, but could we be doing a little bit more of that and then we're going to be fine?
Yeah, I think, as I said, I think that you still know. I guess my point is that it's, like I said, it's like the missing piece of a puzzle, but I don't think that negates the value of the other pieces. I guess that would be the best way to put it, because we do body weight stuff. We're jumping with body weight. We're hopping with body weight. I think it's just looking at this and saying, and this was, I think, maybe I didn't get it across clearly enough in the article. It was one of these things where we're doing everything right. Why aren't we getting faster? Do you know what I mean? Like, why aren't we increasing our times more?
But you're saying you're doing everything right, but maybe you weren't doing things right? Like it's what's the Disney guy saying?
This is, we know now, I guess, as we've always talked about, I absolutely positively could be having this conversation with you again a year from now saying, Ant, you were right. Because I can't tell you how many of these conversations I've had with people where initially I'm like, I don't think so. And then later on, I say, yeah, you were right. And I do believe that's, as I said, that's the thing about searching for the Holy Grail and looking for the perfect workout and saying, okay, what are the pieces? Is it a 4-piece puzzle? Boom, 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 boom. Or is it an 8-piece puzzle? Or is it a 500-piece jigsaw puzzle? I don't really know. And I think that's what's so cool about this is that I can sit here with you 60 years old almost, 37 years in, and say, hey, I made a really big change in my programming last year, and I think it's really going to help us. To me, that is awesome. And I wish more people had that sensation. I think there's a lot of people who are afraid of that sensation.
Yeah. But I still think, like you said, with the puzzle, we have to keep looking at it like, I didn't get the corner piece. I'm still looking for another corner piece. And wait a minute, is this the right shape in here? Because I don't know if this is right, because I was wrong about this other piece. This could be.
There have to be. I think you always need to have that healthy skepticism of looking at it. And I think I think I've said this before on the podcast, but I had an orthopedic surgeon friend one time who told me his philosophy was don't be the first guy to do a new procedure and don't be the last guy. And so I think the flip side of that is don't be the first guy to change and don't be the last guy to change. And sometimes I'm okay being the first guy, really, if I think I'm right. And I'm okay running a little pilot experiment, particularly, as I said, I got my little lab rat groups, and you kind of go out and say, hey, let's try this, see what happens. Does anything good happen? Does anything bad happen? What goes on? What doesn't go on? And it's, I guess it's healthy to always be looking. And I think it's unhealthy to always be changing. And so it's like change, but not too fast.
Yeah.
It's kind of like the change is great, you go first idea kind of thing. Like Steve was trying to get me to change Steve Bunker for a long time, and I resisted. And then sometimes I look and think, God, I'm such an idiot. Why was I resistant? Why wasn't I a better listener? But I think you're always going to have, like we always, my presentations always have the scale picture. You're balancing. And we always talk about, we're balancing risk and benefit. But I think you're always balancing something in terms of too much, too little. Do I want to change a lot? Do I want to change a little? How much can I do? How much can I not do? So yeah, you may be right. You may be gloating over me a year from now and saying, see, Mike, I told you, you're not doing that anymore. And I'll be, you were right. I was wrong.
Yeah.
But I don't think so. I guess that's what I'm saying to you. I don't think so. I don't see the next quantum shift like this one. And even then, when I look and say, it's not a quantum shift. All we really did was take something that we were already doing and then added a slightly different intent to it. We were already running sprints. We might have run somewhere 6, 7, 8, 10 yard, 10-yard sprints a week. But we weren't running them with that intent. We weren't running them with that intensity. So in some ways, I would look at you and say, that's a really small, big change to be oxymoronic.
Yeah. And then, I'm just saying it's kind of the similar thing is like not getting rid of something like Olympic lifts, but maybe saying, you know what, we only clean now. Because, like that's what I could see you going into and just saying, we don't have the time anymore. We spent more time on this area where we don't want to spend the time on that. Again, I'm just picking on Olympic lifts right now because.
Yeah, no, I'm saying, and you could start to look at things and say, there's some redundancy here. I might look at you 3 months from now or 3 years from now and say, you know something? All we do is trap bar jump now. Nobody Olympic lifts anymore. I wouldn't tell you that was out of the realm of possibility. Because again, I don't know if I would have said there was a time when we back squatted and then we only front squatted. Then there was a time when we started doing split squats and still front squats. And then there was a time we dropped front squats and went to just split squats. So as you say, you don't, it's like never say never because you don't know.
Absolutely. I just want to tell everybody they need to really read also between the lines here because the people that have followed you the most over the years, like I said, I think, people ask me like, what is Coach Boyle, what is one thing he's really taught you? I always said he's given me permission to admit I was wrong and to change my program. So I didn't feel so bad when I went to my clients and I would say, listen, I know we've been doing this for the last 3 years, but I think we found a better way to do it. Where in the past I might not have done that. And I think that's a common theme among a lot of people. That's the comments that I've been getting on my social media, people saying, oh my God, yeah, this is what I love about Mike, and he's always searching. And we have to kind of remember that it's not just about the sprinting here, it's about that approach. So good stuff, Coach.
Thank you, Ian. I appreciate it.
All right. Well, we will. You have a great Thanksgiving, and we'll talk to you next time.
All right. You too. Thanks, Ian. I'll talk to you soon.
All right, hey guys, right now, Perform Better, they're having their huge holiday sale, up to 40% off. So many items. Now's the time to get them. Remember, if you're opening a gym, they have an amazing facility design team. They can help you with all your design needs, not just equipment. So check them out. They have a special page all for facility design. Also, the one-day seminar dates have been announced, with New Jersey kicking it off, Fair Lawn, as usual, on January 5th. You can check all the information out at performbetter.com for all their products and info on their educational seminars.
Welcome to the Functional Movement System segment. My name is Jenna Gourlay, and today I would like to finish a two-part series about a basketball player that I worked with recently. For part one, we looked at how we screen both her movement and her capacity, and in this second segment, we're going to get into what we did and how we impacted her in a few surprising ways. A quick review, this is our Division I college basketball player that after screening presents with dysfunction in her inline lunge and her trunk stability push-up at the level of the FMS, and dysfunction with her movement control, her explosive control, and her impact control on the FCS. Her goal was to be pain-free, which we took care of, and to be able to show more power at the post, especially with contested shots. We know that she wants to work on her power and her ability to finish layups, but right now she has some patterns out on the FMS and the FCS. We have all the information, and we know that we first need to fix the functional problems of the trunk stability push-up and the inline lunge. If you think about it, if her push-up is out, we know she has difficulty resisting extension, which is going to be hugely important for her at the post. We're going to need to get her the ability to resist extension when we then go on to work on her training and her skill development. So while we know her performance goal, we do owe it to her to fix her functional and her physical dysfunctions to benefit the more specific sport training. Now, after 2 sessions, we brought her inline lunge and her trunk stability push-up up to a 2, which we're happy with. And what we actually saw happen was that her squat went up from a 2 to a 3 without us even working on it. Now, the cool thing about how we know her FMS data ahead of time is that after fixing her FMS patterns, we saw a 3 and a 4-inch improvement on her motor control screen without even working on it. That means that when she's stabilizing on her one arm, she's now able to reach 4 inches farther with the other. This is a substantial increase in terms of her motor control. After her motor control was good, we moved to her power control, knowing that we really need to improve that broad jump to be greater than 110% of her height. Again, she's 70 inches tall and she's only jumping 68 inches. This is that college basketball player that can't cover the height of her jump with her broad jump. Now, we started working with ropes and having her focus on sending and receiving the wave of the rope, and what we saw was an immediate response where she gained 8 inches on her broad jump. This was so exciting to see after one session that she was jumping almost a foot farther than she was previously. And you could tell that she knew she was jumping better because the second that she landed, she looked at me and would say, oh, that was a lot better than the last one, without me even reading her number. Now, once we improved her power, we did go back and we rechecked her impact control or her energy storing, but we still found that it was below what we'd like to see. If we don't fix this, she's going to be incredibly inefficient on the court. This is an athlete in a fast sport who's unable to recycle her power. So when she's going for a layup or when she's moving on the court, she's losing energy with each step instead of moving more like that spring. This is definitely something we want to address for her because if we get her energy storing better, we're going to make her more resistant to fatigue and more effective on the court in general. Now, we tried a few different things to improve her impact control, but she responded best to using Indian clubs and simple jump roping. After she would do the clubs, she would tell me that she felt a lot lighter and that, she felt good when she was jumping. This was definitely evident in her triple jump, which went from being 96%, so that's 3 times her broad jump in a row. She was only covering about 96% of that distance to now covering 112, where she's gaining distance every time she jumps. We also saw this translate to her single leg 2-1-2 bound when she went from 102 and 103% of her single leg hop on the right leg and the left to 121 and 122% of that single leg broad jump. To put this in perspective, she gained 13 inches on her single leg bound. Think about what that looks like if you looked at her doing a layup. She now has 13 more inches when she does the lead up to her layup, and she can cover that much more distance. Now, in 5 weeks, we took her from painful to increasing her jumping ability, and that's not even the best part. After being out or limited for the last couple of weeks, she went back to full training. And I got a call that first day back from the athletic trainer asking, what did you do with her? The athletic trainer was shocked that she really hadn't been running all that much while we had been working on everything, but her mile time dropped to 7:51. That's a 43-second decrease. When she went into preseason a few weeks later, she was so excited to tell me that she felt stronger and that she did feel better able to finish her shots. It's awesome to see how excited she was, and it's also awesome to have the objective measures to back it up. In all 3 years of college, this preseason, she recorded her best scores on her beep test, her shuttle run, and her mile time. So not only did her movement and her performance elements improve, but she was better able to develop skill on top of that solid platform. She kept saying things like she felt better and it felt like training was making more of a difference this year than it had in the past. And we know from her numbers that she now had more physical resources to draw from for that skill and that training development. If you aren't using the screen or you're only using parts of the screen, you may be surprised by the impact you can have on an athlete's sports-specific training by first taking care of function or performance elements. That's it for today. My name is Jenna Gourlay, and this has been a Functional Movement System segment. For more information, please check out functionalmovement.com, and thanks for listening.
All right, now it's time for the Results Fitness University Business of Fitness segment. I'm here with Rachel Cosgrove. Rachel, thanks for doing this.
Thanks for having me.
All right, a little different, but I had a couple questions for Rachel, so we wanted to kind of take the next couple episodes to answer them. And so over the last year, if you follow Rachel on social media at all, or even Alan, you'll know that she's been competing in obstacle course races. And she actually made it to the World Championship level recently. And but at the same time, she's running her business. And I saw the level of commitment that she had. Even I stayed out with the Cosgroves for 2 days in the summer and saw the level of commitment that she's had to the training and also to her business. So I wanted to ask her a few questions. So, Rach, you ready for this?
I'm ready.
All right. Well, first of all, congratulations on all your success this year in the OCRs.
Well, thank you.
All right.
It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah. But, you've talked about in the past being careful with not only clients, but employees, having, they're not really your friends, that, we have to be careful. We have to draw a line between being like a teammate. Now that you have some athletes doing this, you have Sawyer, who's one of your top coaches doing it and competing at the World Championships too. And, here you are, the boss. So how do you kind of, with those, your own competitive athletic pursuits, which are very serious, how do you draw the line between all of that?
Yeah, I think, we all have to know where our professional boundaries are and where our professional lines are with both our clients and our team members. And, that's something that, as we've talked about this before on past episodes of having those professional, lines in place. So definitely when you start to race and start to travel together and start to do, where do those, it starts to get kind of blurry. So it's really figuring out how can you make sure you still keep, that professionalism in place. And I think it's something that, if you have it in place, it's not going to be any different. And so even though you're off site, maybe you're not at the gym in a work environment, the one thing that you want to think about is, like you were mentioning, sometimes your roles do change. So there's the boss employee relationship that you have at the gym when you are working, and that could be one relationship. And then if you start to race together and you start to maybe coaching each other, or this becomes kind of a different relationship. It's the idea of compartmentalizing. So really like wearing different hats. And I think Alan and I have gotten really good at this because we work together and we're married, and, like he coached me for these races. And so, being able to switch your hats with different people and also teaching them how to do that, and knowing that, like this weekend, if we go to a race and we're racing together and we're in a maybe it's teammate relationship, or we're in a coach athlete relationship, which like Alan's been the one coaching myself and Sawyer, so it's really like Sawyer and I are teammates and Alan's our coach. That's kind of the hats we're wearing, which there's still that professionalism. There's still we're still not crossing the line into becoming personal friends, but it's kind of a different relationship, if that makes sense. You're really there more, and we almost like do a very good job of, we're not going to talk about work when we're racing. We're going into race. That's what we're here for. And so that idea of the power of full engagement, I think it's important as you do take on other roles with your employees or with your clients, and you are taking on, other things like this, like racing, if that becomes a part of what you're offering, knowing that you have those boundaries in place, you have those lines in place, keeping those professional lines in place, and then knowing how to kind of switch your hat. So if you do have a coach athlete relationship with one of your clients, or obviously that's what we have with our clients, or one of your employees, or even a teammate relationship, that can be a different hat, a different relationship that you have while still maintaining that professionalism, and really having that powerful engagement. So then when we're back at the gym in that, like Sawyer and I might be teammates out racing together and helping each other and supporting each other as we do anyway. But then as we get back to, at work, like it's very clear, like she knows, I know, that it's definitely I'm the boss. She's our employee. And if there's things that we say, this is how this needs to go, or this is, what needs to happen, those conversations happen. And I think the bottom line is clear communication, just making sure that whoever it is that you are, having wearing different hats with, I think that's a great way to think of it. Being able to, really communicate that with each other, and knowing that, hey, just because we're wearing these hats over the weekend, doesn't mean that it changes, when we're in the work environment. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I think, you made it pretty clear that, number one, teaching them is really about these different roles and understanding and having that clear communication, because really it has to be set up beforehand, because a lot of times I think with a lot of people out there, a lot of business owners, it'll happen and they didn't set it up. They didn't have that clear communication. They didn't have those roles with those hats. And then when an event like this comes up, or, all year, then now they're in trouble because they didn't set it up beforehand.
Yeah, and I would definitely say, like, if you're going to race competitively, ideally pick races that you can do that maybe you don't have your clients doing, or you don't have, your employees doing, that can be your own. You can be totally selfish, and that's your race that you can be a competitive athlete in, so you don't have to worry about other people. And, like with Sawyer and I, like, she knows, like, if we're both at the same race, she knows I'm there to compete. She's there to compete. So, I'm not going to worry about her. She's not going to worry about me. And so we're not, but I think it is important to pick race. Like, a lot of times people try to coach a team to do a race, like, oh, we're all going to go do this race. And then they decide to compete in that race, and now they're leaving their clients. And so if your clients are, whatever the one big race is you're doing a year, or two big races you're doing with your clients, don't compete in those races. Be the coach, put the coach hat on, be the coach for them, and don't be the competitive athlete at those races, if that makes sense. It's hard to do both.
Yeah, absolutely. Good stuff. Well, we got more questions. We'll save them for the next couple episodes. So, Rach, thanks for doing this.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, and if anyone wants to learn anything else, come on by to resultsfitnessuniversity.com.
Hey, this is Adam.
And this is Tim.
Welcome to the Train Road Data-Driven Coaching segment.
Yeah, so Adam, as a coach, it's hard to keep up with the research and the science. It just is. We're pretty strapped for time. So when you're looking into these type of things, keeping yourself educated, looking to research, what would be some, basic information you'd want to give to a coach?
Well, let me answer that with a question.
Cool.
So do you read studies that come out?
I do, yes.
All right, and it takes you a lot of time, right?
It does.
Do you read more than just the abstract of those studies?
Sometimes, not all the time.
All right, so that's step number one.
Yeah,
if you're going to read a study, you got to read the paper.
True.
But the other thing is, I might suggest that reading an individual study on a topic may not be the best option in a lot of cases.
Interesting, because you don't hear that all the time.
Yeah, I mean, because we say, hey, read the research.
Read.
So here's the problem, though, is that have you read all of the other papers? Say there's 20 papers on a given topic and a new one comes out. Have you read all those other ones?
Most likely not.
Almost none of us have.
Right.
Even if you went to school for this stuff, even if you got a PhD, you probably did that for you read all the papers on a really narrow set of subjects.
Yeah,
right? That's what a PhD is. It's super narrow. But you literally can't be an expert in everything.
Right.
That's not how the world works, right?
Right.
So, there are a type of paper that are really helpful and help you understand the context, right? So if I read a paper and I don't know the context of other research, it's just one data point. It's like, well, I don't know. Do I do something with this?
Right.
But, if you're lucky, there are systematic reviews and meta-analysis out there. And what those are is somebody else who is an expert in the field went and by predetermined criteria in a systematic way, they went and found all the papers on a certain topic, and then they put them all together with statistics.
Got it.
And try to figure out what the body of evidence actually says about that.
Okay, that makes sense.
These are they come from medicine, where you study blood pressure in hundreds of different groups and a bunch of different studies. You have a ton of data, but we're starting to get more of those in strength conditioning as there's more research.
Yeah.
And the really nice thing is, let's go back to that example where there's 20 studies, is if I picked one of those studies out of a hat and showed you the result, would that result be representative of the entire population of studies?
Most likely not.
Maybe not. I have no idea, right?
Undetermined.
So even when we're pretty sure, for example, heavy strength training makes you stronger, right? There's going to be a study out there, at least one probably, that shows that it actually made people worse.
Right.
Somehow,
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that's the way it is.
Okay.
And so what this meta-analysis does is you'll see a nice diagram called the forest plot, and it'll show you all the studies they picked and a visual representation of where they all stack up. And then when you see that, 18 out of 20 showed that heavy strength training made you stronger, right? You have a good reason to believe that that's true.
Yeah, that makes sense. And you can even it's okay, right, to go back a little bit in time, so to speak, to find data. I know we are taught most recent stuff is the best, but that's not necessarily the case.
Yeah, that's just called recency bias. That's just how human brains work. It's the thing you heard last is probably the thing you're going to lean on and remember the most. But don't fall into that trap.
Makes sense.
That's going to do it for us today. Go to trainheroic.com, start your 14-day free trial. When you're talking to one of our representatives, tell them the Strength Coach podcast sent you for 10% off a year of the Pro or Elite Edition.
All right, now it's time for the Hit the Gym with the Strength Coach. And today I have on Fergus Connolly. You might remember I had him on a couple months back when he first came out with his book, Game Changer. He's one of the world's leading experts in team sports and human performance. He's the only coach who have worked full-time in every major league around the world. Coach, you got a new book coming out. It's called 59 Lessons, and that's working with the world's elite coaches, athletes, and special forces, some of the lessons that you learned from them. Coach, thanks for doing this.
Oh, thank you for having me on.
Absolutely.
It's always good to be on with you.
All right. Well, I'll tell everybody, we should have recorded. We just spoke for about 45 minutes on some of this stuff, some of the lessons that you learned in the book. And I have my success book coming out. And so a lot of things that are similar. So talk to us a little bit about, where'd this book come from? I mean, 59 lessons. Was it something that you were always working on? Was it just something that you were I'm going to take all my blog posts and put them together? Where'd this come from?
Well, I got to tell your audience, Anthony, when I get my book, you're getting the first copy because I want the first copy of yours. What you've described to me, I really want to read it. Nice. I mean, you wrote, you wrote a book that I would have wanted to write, and I'll be fascinated to hear your side. And I think we wrote both our books for the same reason. I wanted two things I wanted to do. One was I wanted to thank all of the different coaches and people who have helped me on my way. That was important to me. And, there are some people mentioned in the book who are no longer with us, which is all the more poignant. But I wanted to thank all of the different people all around the world that I learned from. And there are probably people in the book who won't realize the impact that they had on me and on my career. And the second thing was, because of that, I wanted to pass on to the next generation coming through, the people who call me or who contact me for advice. I wanted to give them, a roadmap and say, hey, these are the things that I learned from these great coaches, and you need to go learn from them. And here are some of the there are a lot of mistakes in the book. These are mistakes I made, and learn from these mistakes. And this will help you hopefully be a better coach and on your journey. And I think, like people like we spoke for 40 minutes about people like Mike Boyle and Dan Paff and different people that I've learned from. And I want to share with, everybody else just some of the real pieces of gold I learned from those people. That's important to me. Say thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, when I was first coming up with this idea for my book, similar to what you just said, I always love the saying, a good man learns from his mistakes. A great man learns from others' mistakes as well, right? And,
yes.
That was important.
Yeah, there's another friend of mine, Angus Reid, has just written a book with a brilliant title called Thank You, Coach. And you could have used the same title for mine. It was to say thank you to the people and to learn from, because a lot of them shared as well, mistakes that they made. And something that I think is really important for young coaches and for people in general is you don't go to learn knowledge from an expert. You go to learn how that expert gained their knowledge. There's a difference. In other words, like I went to learn to study sprint technique with Charlie Francis. I didn't come away with a checklist of things. I came away with an understanding of how he corrects sprint technique. And that gave me the ability to continue to teach myself. That's a really, really important thing. That's one of the things that separates, the good from the great. If you go and hang out with Stu McGill and Dan Paff in Arizona and you spend time with them, what I've learned to study from those guys is how they continue to learn, how they correct, not what they do. It's the how, like how their brain thinks. That's what separates the good coaches from the great.
So I so agree. And, we were talking earlier about, Coach Boyle, and I was telling you about one of the things for me that I got out of Coach Boyle wasn't that I shouldn't be doing squats or, that the core is meant, for anti-extension or anti-rotation. It was, he gave me the permission to admit I was wrong to my clients, right? To keep learning. So I think it's very similar to what you just said, where for me it was Mike gave me kind of that permission to be like, look, keep on your journey to learn, keep announcing to everybody that you were wrong and that you learned something new. It's a good thing. You just learned, you changed, you learned how to do something better because you care about them. And I think it's a really important thing, like what you just said, is learn how they gained their knowledge, not specifically what are the X's and O's.
Yeah, and when we were talking earlier, I was thinking, and this is my idea, so do not steal it, okay? I want to write a book. I want to write a book with all those coaches you mentioned and ask them, when did they change their mind on, or what topics did they change their mind on when they were in the middle of their career? Because that is really interesting. I think that, the really great coaches are not afraid to change their mind about certain things. And, because they see something, they know it's better, and they change and they adapt. I think the most authentic coaches are the ones who freely change their minds. So you mentioned Mike Boyle, Dan Paff, even, these guys who are genuinely authentic don't even think twice about changing their mind or their opinion on something, because their authenticity is in trying to improve their client or their athlete or the person they're working with. So their only concern is helping somebody get better. How they look, how they perceive, the fact that somebody might say, oh, well, you changed your mind, doesn't even enter into it. They just want to help somebody get better. And again, it comes back to that authenticity. And you speak of Coach Boyle. People probably won't believe this. I had the most brilliant conversation with him in Boston a few months ago about Louis Simmons and about, the great, things that Louis Simmons does. And you would not think that Mike and Louis Simmons would find things in common, but that's the essence of a great coach. They can look at people who are doing something in an area completely different to them and take positives and take learning outcomes from them.
I agree. Alan Cosgrove, his lecture last year at Perform Better was about looking at, too many times we focus on the things that we don't have in common, which are very small. When what are all the great people? What are all the great people doing that they have in common? Because there must be, if all these people are doing that, there must be something. Not that you don't want to always just copy or kind of go blindly into it, but there must be something. Success leaves clues, and
yes.
You got to look at those things.
Yeah. So, when there's probably I think in 59 lessons, I hope people take away not necessarily the lesson, but just the frame of mind that's needed to, when you go to visit somebody, to learn from them. And actually, that's one of the things is, I think fewer and fewer coaches, young coaches, actually get up off the seat, lock their door, get in a car, get on a plane and go and visit someone to learn with them face to face. I think that's really important. But when you get there, ask why. Why do you do that? Now, why do you do that? And I'm pretty sure I've driven some really well-known coaches absolutely crazy by pestering them with the question, why? But it's really about that. It's why do you do that? It's trying to understand their decision-making process. That's what's really interesting, and that's when you become really, really good at. Because then you can take the principles away and adapt them to the environment and the situation you find yourself in. And I'm only sorry that Coach Boyle. I'm only sorry I met Coach Boyle for the first time a month ago, because the 60th lesson should be go visit Mike Boyle.
Nice. Well, that's a good segue into some of the experts. The book's not out yet, but you did send me some experts, and one of them was Eat Soup with a Knife, and the lesson is about that being able to adapt. Talk to us about this excerpt.
Well, one of the over my career, I've always been somebody who has tried to learn from or interested in things outside of just sport. And I found different areas have been, different things have been really, really helpful to me. Sometimes it's inspiration, and you look at different things, and with that particular, eating soup from a knife, eating soup with a knife really comes back to how adaptable are you in the environment that you're in. So I tell a story that, about a small frontier town, and it was told to me by Charlie Francis, and I forget what we were talking about, but this story stuck with me. And he said, look, imagine you're in a frontier town, it's a busy bar. There's all these guys arguing about, arrows and which arrow is the best and which bow is the best, which wood it should be, made from, what feathers should be used. And meanwhile, sitting at the back of the bar, away from all the hustle and bustle, the raised voices and the arguments, there's a guy sitting with a piece of paper sketching out something and sketching out the origins of a gun. And, Samuel Colt is just sitting there in the corner. He said, lots of people get caught up in the emotion and the argument about something that's not really relevant and not useful, whereas you should really be always focusing on looking beyond that and trying to innovate and be able to adapt to the future. And, early on in my career, I'd really got focused too much on arguing about the minutiae without taking a step back and learning to look at the bigger picture. And that was something I learned from Charlie. All of the great coaches, do it. And you need to be able to, adapt. And, years later with Hank Kreienhoff and another young German coach, Gerhard Kieferstein, we came up with this idea of the omega paradox, where if you know the omega symbol, like it's kind of like a straight line with a curve, we go on this journey where we're trying to go from A to B, and we get distracted sometimes, and we get distracted by fancy gimmicks, by perhaps in nutrition supplements or whatever. The good coaches will go on that journey, and they'll come back around to where they started, but with a better insight into what you're doing. So in other words, your lifting program when you start out in your career might be very similar to the lifting program you're doing 15 years later. You just have a far better insight. You stick to the basics. You can adapt better, but the programs may not be all that much different. Like a squat is still going to be a squat, but you can adapt it. You can change it. You can understand your athlete far, far better. So it's having that insight, and it's good coaches are innovative and have better insight than, just than the normal coaches.
Absolutely. And I think with that idea too, Coach Boyle wrote an article about being a chef. And he said, in the beginning, you shouldn't try to be a chef. You should just be a cook. You should be on the line and just follow the recipe for now.
Yes.
Right. And then once you've mastered that, you become a sous chef. And so when you're a sous chef, you're kind of learning new recipes and all these different ways to do things, and you can experiment. And then when you really kind of get your own philosophy based on all these different ideas, you can now become a chef. So kind of like you said, you're in a straight line, you go around the semicircle, and then you finally back into that straight line to kind of keeping it, simple and keeping that philosophy, you've built that philosophy over time.
Yes, and I use the chef analogy quite a bit as well, because it's so accurate. When you start out, you get a recipe or you copy a recipe from someone, and you try and produce whatever the dish is. I always use Irish stew as an example because it's the best meal in the world, but I use that as an example. So you can give anybody a recipe and get them to cook it. But no two chefs following even the same recipe will produce the exact same dish or taste, because we all have our own personality and we do things slightly differently, ever so slightly differently. So that's where that's where two coaches have their own identity, their own personality and everything. They follow the same training program, but they have different impacts on their clients, on their athletes. Now, the second thing is when something goes wrong with how we prepare it, the ingredients in the preparation, and we make a mistake, that's the opportunity to learn. That's where a good coach, reflects, is very aware of what they did, what mistake they made, and they correct that mistake, they tweak it, and sometimes they make it even better. A coach who's not yet ready doesn't learn. So that when something goes wrong with the dish, the cooking, the recipe, or they decide they want to innovate and they want to get it, be a little bit more exciting and add something to it, that's where progress is being made. And that's where, really, really good coaches learn. They try things, or they see what somebody else does, they try it themselves, and they're really aware of the outcome. And that's how they keep getting better.
Absolutely. And you used a good example with Ashley Jones, who was the strength coach for the All Blacks. And you were talking about they would basically use, different balls and play soccer as well, and they would throw the ball around like with some Aussie rules, because and some Gaelic rules that you brought because the different sizes and shapes would challenge the player's skills. Talk to us about that idea and how maybe strength and conditioning coaches, because we are the Strength Coach Podcast, how they can kind of use that in their own practice.
Yes, so for, as a strength coach, okay, we're taught that there are certain principles that we must adhere to, and rightly so. And we're taught that there's certain rules that we must follow to develop strength or hypertrophy or speed or agility. So I go to New Zealand to watch the All Blacks, the most dominant team in the world in this one particular sport, prepare their athletes. And I get there and they do a lot of the traditional training. But then when we go onto the field, I see them playing games that use rules that are completely different to what they're used to. And I'm wondering, this is wrong. I'm in my early 20s. I'm going, he's training them wrong, but it doesn't make sense to me. So I start to think, and I ask Ashley Jones. And by the way, Ashley Jones is one of the greatest, not just strength coaches, but one of the greatest people in the industry. If for any young strength coach out there, you got to read everything that he writes or everything that he presents. A brilliant, truly brilliant guy. He had a huge influence on me personally and professionally. But what I realized, what Ashley was doing was he was expanding the players' awareness and their ability to adapt. He was putting them in uncomfortable situations just for small periods of time. So they were allowed, in rugby, you can't pass the ball forward, but he would sometimes play games where you had to pass the ball forward. And he was doing it in a very controlled environment. Now, what I took away from that was it's okay to be different for small periods. It's okay to take your players, your athletes, your clients out of their comfort zone for short little periods. So sometimes it's okay to take to change your training program up a little bit, because it spurs or it inspires adaptation in a different way. And that was the big learning outcome for me. And I saw it at the most elite team in the world, I wouldn't have taken that lesson away. I would have, only that I saw it firsthand, I would have gone, they only do this in one particular way. But that, having those, seeing those team sport players play in chaotic situations and have to adapt, taught me something very important. And you'll see it in some elite military groups where that's what they prepare for, is to expect the unexpected and to be able to adapt to the unexpected. So get comfortable being uncomfortable.
Yeah, and you had mentioned also about Jerry Collins, who was another another rugby fan. No, rugby player. All rugby fans will know who that is. And he would train for it. Give us talk to us about what he did.
Yeah, so he was playing for the Ospreys. He wasn't All Black. He had retired and he was playing for club team. And I would visit the club because we were working with them. And this guy had done everything in rugby, was a legend. He would be on the field for 30, 45 minutes after practice, maybe an hour, running around doing his own training on the field when he didn't need to be. And now there were two things. He loved the game of rugby. Like, there are stories about him traveling, the length of a country and, to play. He just loved the game. But he would practice with the kickers. He wasn't a kicker, but he would practice with them. He would practice with the different positions that he wasn't playing with. So imagine, a linebacker deciding he wanted to go practice with the corners when that group was practicing, or he wanted to catch balls from the quarterback, because he just loved the game. But what made him a truly great player was he was so adaptable in the game and could play what's in front of him. Far too often, we don't just specialize our young kids in one sport. We specialize them in one position in that sport. And they can't adapt to when something goes wrong. They just can't adapt to, because we as human beings love security. We love knowing what's coming next. But when something goes wrong, we're caught out of position in a game or something, it throws us way off. The best players are those who can adapt to chaos, and Jerry Collins was brilliant at that. And by the way, if anybody is in front of a computer listening to this after the podcast, go on YouTube and Google Jerry Collins tackles, because this guy, he was like a chiropractor. He would rearrange backs with some of his tackles. He was incredible.
By the way, I read that when I read this excerpt, I Googled Jerry Collins hitting when he knocked out
Colin Jarvis. Yeah.
Yeah, Colin Jarvis. Yeah. Man, it was brutal.
Yeah. He, apologies to Colin Jarvis, but he hits this guy. You got to watch it. Anybody listening to this, you got to watch it. But he hits him so hard, and the commentary says something like, he's, basically he was unconscious before he hit the ground. And there's a brilliant interview with Jerry, and sadly Jerry passed away a few years ago in a tragic car accident. But there's an interview with Jerry where he's asked about tackles, and his humility comes through in it. They're essentially inviting him to brag about how hard he hits, and his reply is, it hurts when you hit that hard too. In other words, it's not that he's invincible. Tackling somebody is something that hurts both sides. So some days, to use a phrase, some days you're the fire hydrant, and some days you're the dog. Some days they come off, and some days they don't. But yeah, he was an incredible player. But that was the purpose of the book as well, was to share, not behind the curtain, so to speak, but to give people just the other side of what makes some of these people great.
Yeah. This story actually reminded me of Ben Hogan, believe it or not. It's going to sound funny, but when you had said, kind of being able to adapt for different situations, although golf might not have a lot of chaos in it, he would put a golf ball, bury a golf ball at the top of a bunker and try to hit it out of there. And he would spend 2 hours doing that. And he would put himself in practicing all these crazy situations that would only come up in a very rare circumstance. And they'd ask him why are you spending your time on that? Shouldn't you be working on your drives? And he wanted to any situation that could come up in golf, he wanted to have said, I've been here already. I've prepared for this, and I'm ready. I know how I have to hit this.
That's, I don't know where I got the mindset from. I have no idea, but that's one of the reasons that through my career, I purposely tried to work in as many different sports as possible, because early on, I was put in difficult situations, maybe because I was Irish, I ended up, first of all, working in the UK, in England with, different people. I was very young, out of my comfort zone. So I got used to being uncomfortable in different cultures, different environments, different people. And I realized that became a strength very soon, working and having to move from soccer to rugby to the NFL, then to college football, to the military, to basketball, to these different environments. I realized that being forced out of your comfort zone, having to deal with these difficult things, actually becomes your strength. It means that you become adaptable. We sometimes it's not that we get lazy, we sometimes don't realize that your greatest learning comes from those challenges. Being put in a difficult situation, if you choose to learn and if you choose to reflect on it, it can become your greatest learning opportunity.
Absolutely. And a lot of these stories too, so far that they talk about humility, and you have a great story about, I hope I pronounce his name right, Greg Chappell?
Greg Chappell.
Greg Chappell. Yeah. Tell us that story about humility.
Oh, yeah. So, it's a good story. It's, I was asked to consult for Cricket Australia, and I know nothing about cricket, as a sport. I know very little. And when I get there, we were talking. I meet this guy, lovely older gentleman, and I didn't quite know who he was. And, I was introduced to him, and he gave me a book as a gift as I was leaving called First Tests, which were about how the great generation, which actually he was, he wasn't talking about himself, but it was actually about his generation. He was a legend of the game. But I as I'm leaving, I go, I got to give this guy a book, and I got to send him a thank you afterwards. And I'm in the car I'm in the car being brought to the airport as I, to leave to go back to the airport. And I asked the guy who's driving me, what's the address of this building? Because I got to send Greg Chappell, a gift, a book back. he just leans over and he points up, and I'm going, what's he pointing at? I look up, I look out the car door, and I look up at the window, and it says Greg Chappell Street. And I go, and I realize, okay, Greg Chappell was a great cricketer, but it slowly dawns on me, you know that you are a true legend of the game when you go to work in a building on a street that is named after you. But it wasn't just that was impressive. It was the fact that this guy, who was a novice legend of the game, would engage me in questions about performance, about teaching, about trying to learn more about how to improve the game of cricket. That was what, that humility, that was what blew me away. And it only dawned on me as I was leaving, leaving Brisbane, what a great cricketer he was. And that's when it really had such an impact on me, that this guy, such a great cricketer, was still keen to learn, after everything he had done. And that's a common theme in all great coaches. Irish rugby coach Joe Schmidt, even Graham Henry, are still keen to learn and to get better. And it's not, humility is not, it's not an overt thing in that you have to constantly tell people how little you know. It's not like that. It's by just being aware and wanting to, being aware and being open to learning. I would meet Graham Henry, who was the All Blacks coach, after games. And I was at that stage, I was just a sports scientist. I was Irish. I was working, I would meet him in the corridors, and we would joke about they were going to play England next, and I would tell him, not to take his foot off the gas when they would play England, and we'd laugh about that. But he was still open to learning. A lot of coaches who are not successful or struggle with success would not even engage someone like me in conversation. They would just pass on by. They would assume that there's nothing to learn. And we spoke about this earlier. There's that saying that a wise man will always learn from a fool, but a fool might not learn from a wise man. And I always remember that quote because, you can, leave a conversation, and if you've not learned anything, are you walking away as a fool, or are you walking away as a wise person?
Absolutely. And I think, those same people, and you mentioned this in that some of the best people that I've come across, the Boyles, the Al Vermeils, Dan John, they also, they're willing to share. And they're willing to sit down with people like Al Vermeil or Greg Rose. You could see these guys sitting on a chair at conferences after they've already done their lectures and talking to somebody for an hour who, it's crazy. It's another quality that you also mentioned in this excerpt. Yes. Yeah. I think Dan Pfaff has said it best, that he gets humbled every day. And I think it's more obvious in track and field because, you're dealing with fewer variables. The margins are so fine and there are fewer variables. And as a coach, there are fewer inputs or fewer people involved. In team sport, there are so many more variables, so many more coaches that it's easier to shift the blame. But in track and field,
you have to, if your athlete doesn't improve, there are fewer people to point fingers at. And Dan says it best, that he gets humbled every day. I think really we all get humbled every day. We sometimes just choose to not recognize it, or we're not looking for that all the time. The great coaches, like you say, are really passionate. They know how little they know. Like Al Vermeil has one of the best sayings ever for anybody in this industry. It's that the only people who made an athlete were his parents. Because we were talking, Al and I were talking about some particular coach who was going on about how he made this guy and how he made that guy. And Al, brilliantly said, the only person who ever made an athlete were his parents. And he's so right. Once you start to take credit for an athlete or for an athlete's success, you've lost. Your humility is gone. You're not going to get better. You're not going to, you're going to become insecure. And I was speaking with a coach yesterday who was dealing with some issues, with somebody in senior management. And I was saying to them, look, it comes from, three eyes. Generally, if somebody's causing you trouble or you can't find agreement, it usually comes from incompetence, which comes from insecurity, which leads then to this, challenge where they're having this incident with you. And to avoid that incompetence, you must be humble, because you'll recognize then, and you don't become as insecure, because when you truly are aware of how little you know, you can't be insecure at all, ironically, because you realize there's nothing that I have to protect here. I know what I know, but there's so much I don't know, and I just got to keep getting better. And those coaches are the ones who are so open to sharing. And you learn so much from being around those people. I spent a week at Altus with Dan Paff, Stu McMillan, George Carval, and it was just brilliant. We spent a week basically telling each other the mistakes we made and the things that we didn't know. It was brilliant.
Yeah, it's funny because I do another thing, a YouTube show called Strength Coach TV, where I go and visit gyms, and it started because Coach Boyle said one of the things that he wishes he had done more was visit more coaches in person. And I said, okay, that's great, but we can't always go visit people when we're young. So I wanted to take my camera to different gyms, and one of the things in the beginning I thought, I'm going to go to the best gyms and all the big ones, and then I started to realize that we can learn as well from anybody that has a gym. They've gone through something, and we're going to learn something from them. And that's something that I try to pull out of everybody. Is like you said, I don't want to be the fool walking out of there. I want to be the one. I want to be learning something from them. I think everybody has something to teach if we really just kind of open up to that concept. To be honest with you, you have to be able to understand and not have that arrogance that, this is a small gym, this is 1,000 square feet, and this person doesn't work with anybody famous, so I'm not going to learn from them. I'm going to go to the Cressy's and the Boyles and the Verstegens. I could only learn from them, and to Altus. But we can learn from everybody.
Well, absolutely, and actually, I had yesterday had a call with university program who were asking me questions about sports science, and one of them actually made the point that because we're such a big program and because we're such huge resources, the danger we have is that we invest in technologies and in more and more people, but we're not actually getting better, Fergus, and we need help to understand how to deliver. And it's something that I repeat to so many programs. Limitations make you better. And there are a lot of cases in the military and in conflict where necessity is the mother of invention. Necessity is the mother of progress. If you go visit small gyms that are limited, have limited resources, you will see some of the most innovative ideas. And it may be simply in terms of ergonomics, in terms of the flow of people through a small weight room. It may be in terms of their personality, how they deal with people. You will learn so many invaluable things from them. That's, you're so right. In fact, some of the bigger ones have some of the biggest challenges, for because they've got so many different things that they have to manage.
Yeah, so true. You know, it's funny. We'll finish with this, but you and I, this is not really about the book, but you and I were talking a little bit about the importance, some of the, like you were asking me about some of the things that I learned from doing my project on the success book, and one of the most important things I feel like is besides the mission, I want you to expand on that, but understanding where you're going, what's your vision, where do you want to go, what's the impact that you want to make. I still feel like at the same time, although we want to have that humility, we still don't understand the impact that we're making on so many people. We're doing so many good things. And I do think we do need to sometimes pat ourselves, not pat ourselves on the back, but just recognize that you're making a great impact on people, that you're helping them stay healthy, as long as you're doing it, obviously, for the right reasons. Too many of us just kind of think that we're just, I'm just a trainer, right? We're, like Al says, only their parents made that athlete, but there's still a lot of great things that we're doing. That was one of my big takeaways, and that I want to kind of talk to people about, and I did in my lecture at Perform Better, and I do in the book. What, for you, I know you had talked about they have to understand their vision. Talk to me about your thoughts on that vision, or finding the vision. Was it something that you felt like you had early on, or something that you wish you can go back to? Just give us your overview on that.
Yeah, I think the industry is at a really interesting time. Like we spoke about, the first generation of strength coaches who came through in this industry are now retiring or at retiring age. So this is a very young industry, so to speak. And I think, and there's a lot of confusion because people don't know, what their future looks like. And there's a distraction, do I want to be, do I want to be a Mike Boyle? Do I want to be, whoever, who are my role models? And that helps you identify what your vision is. But I think as individual strength coaches, you need to understand, your identity, your purpose, and, your mission or your vision. What do you want to end up at the end of your career as? Not the external you that everybody, sees on Twitter or on Facebook or whatever. Who do you, again, to go back to this word, authentically want to be? Because, you're not going to be buried on social media. Your funeral is not going to be held on Twitter. There's only going, my mother used to say that they only need 6 people to carry you at the end. So to those 6 people, who are you going to be to those 6 people? That's the real you. One of my friends who works with Special Forces Group had a brilliant analogy that I think we can end on this one, but it was about your haircut. So let's say you get a haircut and you're walking down the street and you meet some stranger who passes some comment about your haircut. It's not I don't like your hair. It's a terrible haircut. And then you go home and you meet your wife or you meet your partner and they say, hey, I don't like that haircut so much. Maybe next time we get a different haircut. You will react in 2 different ways to both of those people. But here's the thing. If the first person, the stranger's opinion, bothers you more than your wife or your partner, you've got a big, big problem. There's only one person whose opinion matters, and those are the people your own and the people close to you. So learn to remember that when you get upset or annoyed about different people's opinion, don't worry about what the stranger's opinion of your haircut is.
Love it. And I love that saying about you only need 6 people to carry your coffin.
Absolutely. Awesome. Yeah.
It's awesome. Yeah. Well, Coach, thank you so much for coming on today and talking about your upcoming book, 59 Lessons Working with the World's Elite Coaches, Athletes, and Special Forces. When is it coming out?
I'm hoping in 2 weeks' time.
Okay.
I'm hoping 2 weeks' time. I'll let you know, and I'll get you. Like I said, we're gonna swap because I'm really excited about what you told me about your book.
Great. And we'll have links for everybody to kind of go to Fergus's website and sign up so you can, know when this thing is coming out, because it's going to be, there's so many great stories. We only touched on a couple of them. So, Coach, thanks for doing this.
No, thank you very much for having me on. Thank you.
All right, that's going to do it for episode 244 of the Strength Coach Podcast. Remember, you can try strengthcoach.com out for 3 days, just $1. You'll have access to all the articles, videos, and programs, as well as the best forum on the net. It's the only place to have full access to Coach Boyle. He's on every day answering questions. To access that offer, go to strengthcoach.com, click the Join Now button to get started on your trial. Special thanks to Chris Parier and the folks over at Perform Better. Right now, Perform Better, they're having their huge holiday sale up to 40% off. So many items. Remember as well, the 1 days start again January 5th in New Jersey. Check it out at performbetter.com for all their products and info on their educational seminars. Thanks to Coach Boyle and Fergus Connolly for sharing their insights and philosophies into the world of strength conditioning and performance enhancement. Thanks to Adam Doughty and Train Heroic. Head over to trainheroic.com, start your free 14-day trial. Let them know that the Strength Coach Podcast sent you. You'll save 10% off your first year of Train Heroic Pro Edition. Rachel Cosgrove for the Results Fitness University Business of Fitness segment. Check them out at resultsfitnessuniversity.com. Jenna Gourlay and Functional Movement Systems. Check them out at functionalmovement.com. Thanks to MariGold Bars, high-quality protein with all the premium ingredients, grass-fed protein, gluten-free, organic ingredients, non-GMO, low sugar, and they taste amazing. Go to marigoldbars.com to use the code StrengthCoach10 to get $10 off your first order. My name's Anthony Renne. Go to continuefit.com for all of my resources. Thanks again, and I'll speak to you next time.